debate boils down to on the pro side is basically the most important first argument that they make is that we're not sure about global warming status and how true global warming actually is. But the point of the matter is that we all know that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. That has been proven. And when greenhouse gases have been trapped in the atmosphere, then it is inevitable that the temperature of the atmosphere and the earth will increase. And of course, although global warming is still being debated, there has been a significant amount of information to prove that global warming actually has occurred in the past, and will continue to occur if there are no pieces of legislation or regulations that will be passed out to regulate the amount of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. Also, the pro talks about how the UN has no specific way of regulating this, but we specifically mention in our second contention that the main way, or the main solution to doing this, would be putting a cap on carbon dioxide, which is simply something that the United Nations can't do. The second argument that they keep up is solving of poverty. We asked during Crossfire a specific method, just any method that they will use in reducing poverty, but they could not give us any method. So when it comes to the point where the pro doesn't even give us a method on how they will reduce poverty, we cannot affirm the resolution. Onto the con side, mainly what we have left is the cycle. Our observation 1 talks about how there is a cycle of poverty. Poverty causes environmental destruction and climate change causes poverty. When it comes to the point that this actually occurs, we have to decide which is the most pragmatic decision. When we eliminate one part of this cycle, that would have to be the climate change, because there is legislation that can be passed.
Okay, first of all, the con can't say how many people have died from climate change. They conceded this in their last Crossfire. But we show in our speech that in a 4-minute speech, 68 children will die from poverty. All right? Poverty hasn't always been around, as my partner said. It's not permanent, and therefore it can be solved. Global warming is also currently a theory. The con also conceded that it's still heavily debated. So there's, technically speaking, no hard evidence about global warming, about the facts of it. We don't know if global warming is man-made, and therefore we don't know if it can be controlled. Well, we do know that poverty can be reduced. And once poverty is reduced, then we can go on to help the environment. We have to put the lives of humans over the environment. It's a moral obligation, as we state. The con also still has not proven how climate change does cause poverty. So take this as a concession. But we have proven how poverty helps to reduce climate change. The Millennium Resolutions talks about how 80% of the poor cause CO2 emissions in sub-Saharan Africa. They also still ignore the fact that the resolution does not call for a solution to poverty, but only whether or not it should be prioritized over climate change. So while the pro does not have to give a solution for reducing poverty, we only have to look at whether or not it should be prioritized, and we have given you reasons about why it should be prioritized. Therefore, we urge a strong vote in favor of today's resolution.
So why exactly don't you have to provide a specific method or an example of a method for solving poverty?
That's not what because it's not what the resolution calls for. Like, the resolution just asked which one we should prioritize over the other.
But
don't we have to take that into consideration when we decide which to prioritize?
The resolution calls for when it cannot do both, which one should the UN prioritize over the other. It does not call for any plans. It does not call for any sort of mechanism for solving. It simply states which one should the UN prioritize. So all we have to do is prove how poverty is more important to solve than climate change.
But when making a decision, you're going to have to base it on some level of analysis. At the point where there's no specific plan,
level of analysis that we're going to
analysis. Can I finish my question? There's no level of analysis coming off of that. At what point do we have any level of analysis coming off of your case that we can base a specific decision on that would outweigh the impacts and analysis on our case?
Well, we give you several reasons, actually. Firstly, we talk about how poverty is the only real issue in the round. Firstly, because climate change is still heavily debated, as you conceded in your last speech. And we talk about, secondly, about how in order to solve for climate change, you first have to solve for poverty, as we have proven countless times. And we give you the millennium evidence that tells you specifically that the poor are actually among the highest people who pollute and who cause these environmental issues. So it only makes sense that in order to get rid of that, you first have to solve for poverty.
We also have a moral obligation to solve for poverty.
Yes, so your second contention mainly talks about how the poor cannot solve for environmental destruction because they're living in poverty. And you say that the only way that they can actually solve for environmental protection is when they get out of poverty. But what are we going to do to get them out of poverty? Or like if you can't give us a specific reason or solution how they'll get out of poverty, how do we know that this, after we solve for poverty, then we will solve for environmental destruction?
Again, it is not we are not here to debate that. If so, the resolution would mandate for something specific. We are only here to talk about whether one should be prioritized over the other, and we clearly prove to you how poverty is the only actual real issue in the round, and not just that.
Okay.
It's
so you just provided us with this plan, but you don't actually give us like how you'll carry out this plan. How do we know that this plan is going to work?
We don't give you a plan. It is not our job to give you a plan. And we not only that, we also prove to you how your plan is not even resolutional, because although you can take measures to try to help the environment, it still will not affect climate change. You cannot do that.
So we understand all of that, but you bring up a lot throughout your entire debate is the whole idea that poverty is the only issue in this round. But the point where environmental destruction and climate change, or environmental destruction as a result of climate change, is a major factor. So basically, when considering this overall round, the biggest argument that's going to be weighed in the end is the issue of whether or not there's a specific cycle. Basically the entire time, the pro case attempts to prove that the con cannot prove how climate change leads to poverty. But in our contention one, we specifically talk about the whole idea of deforestation and how a lack of resources, at the point in which a society is at a lack of resources, this is a significant detriment to them. And ultimately, they are going to be living in poverty because they do not have these resources. That's the specific link. Now, what they fail to realize is they keep bringing up the idea that poverty is the only issue within the round. While poverty is definitely an issue, the whole purpose in prioritizing environmental destruction over poverty is a specific idea that at the point where we can solve for environmental destruction, because poverty is a resultant of environmental destruction, we can therefore solve for poverty. So the point in which we have clearly proven this through is specifically our Thailand example. The only vote is definitely one for the con.
Okay, I'll tell you exactly why we win this round. Firstly, we have several concessions. They conceded in the last speech that the resolution does not mandate a plan, but it calls for whether or not poverty should be valued over climate change. So whatever questions or doubts they had in the last speech about whether we are debating the correct thing, we tell you specifically that we do not have to offer a plan. We merely have to tell you specifically how poverty should be valued over climate change. Secondly, they concede the fact that they cannot prove whether or not global warming is going on or whether we can even affect climate change. So whatever plan that they do offer is non-resolutional. Firstly because the resolution calls for affecting climate change, not launching environmental protection legislations, and also because we don't even know if we can even have any sort of effect on the climate. Also, we tell you how we don't even know if global warming is man-made, so whatever plant they would have is futile. Vote for the pro, please.
We appreciate the time that you've taken to watch these kids debate and to give credit to the research that they've been doing for the past month or so. We look forward to your decision to see which team has upheld their argument.